Welcome, low ego action heroes. I'm Debbie Levitt from deltacx.com. We are a full service CX and UX consultancy doing projects, training, and consulting. I'm finally updating our website, so check them out at deltacx.com and customercentricity.com. Also, remember that Larry Marine and I are doing a 2-day workshop in Denver, Colorado coming up soon in mid-May 2023. If you're watching this before, tickets are still available. You can find out more at cxcc.to/RSI for Research Strategy Intensive. So come on and sign up for that while you still can. Before we bring in our super special guest, Dr. Nick, who will also want to tell you about a workshop he's doing, let's thank the wonderful low ego action heroes who are contributing in small and large ways to our little show here through the YouTube join button. Thanks to everybody for keeping me in streaming software and delicious chocolate chips, which I definitely ate today. Remember that you can ask your questions live in the chat. I am monitoring Twitch, YouTube, and LinkedIn. I don't know if Dr. Nick is going to check out the chat room as well. And you can also ask stuff anonymously, especially if you have a long version of your story. deltacx.com/links will lead you to our anonymous question asking. And on the bottom of that page, I've also added some affiliate links in case there's any of the services where I am not sponsored that I recommend that you'd like to try and you don't mind me getting a few dollars for it. You can click those. Otherwise, please just use things that I like and you don't have to give me anything. Hello, Ana Lucia. So let's bring in Dr. Nick and learn who the heck he is. Dr. Nick, who are you?
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Nick. That's so Simpsons. That's Dr. Nick Riviera. I'm Dr. Nick Fine. Hi, everybody. You guys know me. I don't need to introduce myself. I'm the noisy one on LinkedIn who's an advocate for user centricity and real user-centered UX. The same as Debbie.
Excellent. And Dr. Nick, did you try the link I sent you with the chat? I sent it in LinkedIn if you want to try to watch the chat. I don't even know where to move the chat today. I'll have to figure, I don't want it to cover up Nick. We'll have to figure this out. Hey, Karen. Yeah, thank you. That would be great. Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's see. Hi, everybody. Shweta, Karen, thanks for joining. We did get a question ahead of time. Let's see. Okay, just checking my questions. And I'm going to put the first question up and read it out loud. If you're following along at home, you can give some advice as well. This question says, okay, here's my large version. Hello, everyone. My question is, how do I respond to stakeholders who say, your qualitative research is not statistically significant? Oftentimes, my response is that qualitative research is not aimed at producing statistically significant results. Rather, it seeks to provide a deep understanding of the behaviors, tasks, unmet needs, motivations, etc. And then their question is, how can we be sure that it applies to our entire customer base? Are we triangulating it with quantitative research? Thank you for your answer. So I wonder if Nick and I will disagree here, but Nick, go ahead first.
Jesus, what a starting question that one is.
I know, it's a good one.
That's a bit of a humdinger. Like, go easy on me, right? That's what we technically call a clusterfuck. There's so much going on in that. I'm sorry, pardon my language, but there we go. Fine. Sorry. Okay, so let's get into the statistically significant heart of this matter. We're not talking about statistical significance here, but reading behind the question from the stakeholder, or probably a marketing person or chief marketing officer, if I'm guessing correctly, is they want to know, how sure are you? Like that, and you can tell by the follow-up question, how can we be sure that it applies to our entire customer base? So this is about confidence, confidence in results, and they're using statistical significance, I believe, as the language or the vehicle to kind of communicate that. I think that's fairly safe to say. Okay, so qualitative research, as you know, or even quantitative research in our world is generally speaking not about significance, okay? In the world of web analytics and multivariate testing, yes, significance is a massive fundamental deal, but that's not us, not right now. We're UX folk. We're user researchers, we're UX researchers, whatever you call yourself. Significance is not a thing in our world. And this is coming from me, Dr. Nick Fine, PhD, blah, 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 right? I mean, I'm saying this with almost authority. And I don't think anybody could challenge it or would challenge it, because it's just fact. Significance hasn't been and isn't a thing in our world, and probably won't be for some time. When significance is a thing, that's when multivariate testing comes in. That's what it's there to do, right? That's the statistical analysis, shall we say, or the data science of UX, or in our UX world. What we really need to do here, this is about stakeholder management in some respects. How can you give your stakeholder confidence in your insight, right? That's kind of what what they're asking is how do I trust you? How do I know that this is good stuff? So what you really need to do is this is an education exercise. It really is. You often, one of the things that Debbie and I are asked on this show regularly is about, marketing director said, well, it's not 2,000 people, so I'm laughing at your 20 people or 30 people, right? It's an education thing. We're talking about qualitative insight, and we're learning about hypothesis and behaviors. It isn't about, in many stuff, attitudinal stuff, which does require massive sample sizes. Look, I don't want to go off on a massive tangent or speak for 10 minutes on the opening question. I think that pretty much covers it. Debbie, tell me if I'm going on too long, or I think I've covered most of that question. There was so much going into that. I don't want to overdo it. But
there is no too long.
It's UX.
We don't even have another question yet, so there is no too long. We can spend as much as we like on this.
I think that's pretty much all that I think I need to say on that. If I was I'm always thinking, what would I do if I'm in your shoes? And that's what I'm hearing. So it's about getting them on board with the insight that you've raised. Now, if it is only 10 people from Manchester and they all happen to be white males, then yeah, you do have a sampling problem. But speaking hypotheses and in repeated samples, for me, cascaded sampling, or whatever you want to call that, repeat sampling, hypothesis testing is the way to do all of this. And you get confidence when insight plateaus, when you're not learning anything new, especially if your stakeholder is concerned about different contexts, different audiences, different segments, whatever, different geographies. Keep repeating. Take your hypothesis. They wanted it read in Leeds. Let's see, did they want it read in Manchester or London or Exeter or wherever, right? Or different geographies or different other segments. I won't go into them, but you know where I'm coming from. I'm going to leave it there. Debbie, back to you.
Okay, so let's also catch up with the chat before I give my answer. Let's see. Shweta says, how do you define significance? Okay, we'll do that in a moment. Matt says, halfway through, customers know you suck and really enjoying it. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you, everybody. I do have a book. You can buy it at cxcc.to/CKYS. Alejandra is here. Hi, Alex. Alex says, just yesterday I read a quote by statistician Nate Silver who said something like, the numbers have no way of speaking for themselves. We speak for them. We imbue them with meaning. I found it an insightful way to explain the link between qual and quant. And then Two Birds has a question. So Two Birds, we're going to get you on the question list. So please hold. We're still in another question. Okay, so let me give hi, Manuel. Hi, Alex. Let me give hi, Nardine. So many new people here. Hi, everybody. So let me give my response to this. And actually, I cover it slightly in my book. We actually talk about this. If you have the print book or the PDF, it's page 140. If you have Kindle or a searchable version, it's just look for, what's a good thing? Look for surveys are extremely easy to manipulate. Just search that sentence. And basically, I've got a little section here. I had something much longer, but then I cut it down. And basically, at least I think I cut it down. I can't find right now where the rest of it went, but it might be in this chapter 12. So basically, significance has to do with, and Nick will know this better than I will, but significance has to do with statistically statistically significant is when we are doing some sort of study, did we get the right number or enough of the right people? So, for example, as Nick was saying, if our target audience is millennials who use Snapchat, don't recruit me. When I see people coming to our Slack community and they say, oh, go ahead, Nick.
Statistical significance, quite simply, is did it happen by chance or not? That's the nutshell version. That's the ultimate simple, right? Go back to you, Debbie, right? I mean, that if you ask any scientist across the globe, that's effectively what statistical significance is did this thing happen from the effect we were observing, or did it happen by chance? What were the chances of it happening by chance? What was it, luck or not, Debbie?
Right. And by the way, I also go into this a bit in one of my Medium articles. So you can Google for my Medium article from February 2023 called Weeding Out Screener Survey Liars and Bots. And I also end up talking about statistical significance in surveys. So anyway, back to the original question. The original question had to do with, hey, you're doing this qual research. It doesn't seem statistically significant. And the bottom line is that qual research does have its own best practices for how many people we want to meet. But ultimately, whether you're running quant or qual, if you're finding the wrong people, all of this is garbage. So again, if you need to find millennials who use Snapchat and you're surveying me and Nick, and you didn't throw us out of your survey, this is garbage, even if you think you've reached the right number of survey responses. Because very often people are looking for, oh, our population is this, we want statistical significance, we need this many survey responses. Number one, I rarely see people get that many survey responses that are of the right audience. Very often they get 80 survey responses and they go, that's good enough. They really needed 5,000. But I want to remind people that I'm against the idea of, well, qual research isn't really, we didn't talk to many people, we didn't observe many people, we're going to need to validate this with quant. We should run a survey to see if our qual research is true. And what I remind people, and what I wrote on page 140 is, I can write a survey that can validate anything. It doesn't make sense to take the most manipulated or manipulatable form of research, a survey, and claim that we're going to use that as our validation method when it is the most easily manipulated. So what I remind people is that a qualitative study that used the best practices for recruiting the right number of the right people from the right populations, that is significant. That already is correctly recruited. It's valid. And if you have 6 target audiences and you don't meet people from all 6 of these, then sure, the manager in the story is right. How can we say that this is really going to speak for our entire customer base? If you want it to speak for your entire customer base, the best practice is 8 to 12 people for every segment. I hate surveys. Me too. Nick's holding up a sign. I hate surveys. It's even a ticker. It's got terrible tickerness. If your company, I spoke to a company once that had 10 target audiences or segments or personas, and they decided to research with 2 people from 2 of those audiences. Of course, there's no way that qualitative research is going to be valid for probably nobody, but certainly not for the entire audience. So if your manager wants to feel confident, and you want to feel confident that you've done a good job working with as much of the potential and current customer base as possible, then you have to take those segments and you have to recruit 8 to 12 people from them, and then potentially more than that. Hypothetically, you found those people. Hopefully you found a mix of genders, a mix of ethnicities, a mix of ages, if that's appropriate. And then did you find people with disabilities? Did you find people with accessibility needs? Did you find neurodivergent people? So it's just a start. So the more people we can talk to from our audiences, the better, but eventually the curve flattens out, and it might not make a difference to talk to 15 people versus 20 people. And so ultimately, if you can meet about a dozen-ish or so people from each of these segments, you should, if you recruited them correctly, they should be speaking for the customer base. If you recruited them incorrectly, they won't speak for the customer base, and a survey won't fix that. So you can triangulate with quant research, but a lot of that is just fake, because I can write the survey that can say anything. Nick, back to you.
God, I hate surveys. I really, really hate surveys. And you know what? I kind of discount them as a research method. I don't even think about them as a research method. They're like the last thing I think of. I hate them that much. Of course I have to use them. You have to use them. We all have to use them, right? They're a necessary evil. I just think they're too many people's go-to. There's something I wanted to say. I can't remember. I should have written it down, but I was too busy hating on surveys.
Note, yes, write the things down, everybody.
Yeah, no, I really ought to. There's some really... it'll come back to me at a really inappropriate time.
That's okay. Meanwhile, let's go through the chat room. We're going to add Shreya's question to the bottom of the list. Though, Shreya, you are third, and we're still on question 1, so thank you for your patience. We are also going to take a look at some of the other comments. Kayleen randomly said, wow, I just checked the Amazon page for your book, and all the 1 to 4 star ratings have no review. Every review is 5 stars. Yes, I certainly understand that some people who didn't give it 5 stars didn't take the time to leave a review, though I wish they did, even if it was a 1 star. I know that many of the 1 stars were left the week the book came out by people who probably didn't read it. Everybody knows I have a few haters. They like to hang out on Reddit. Magically, my book got 1 star reviews in its first week. I don't even think Amazon could ship the book that fast. So,
yeah,
yes.
Hang on a second. You're assuming there's any level of validity to Amazon reviews, which we all know is riddled with crap. Like,
yeah,
riddled.
every time
let's not get into it.
I just put in a 1 star review this week for a product. I've never had a 1 star review get published because they always tell me it's against guidelines. I've run against their guidelines and they can't publish it. My review was the product was incorrectly manufactured and therefore didn't function correctly, and I was going to return it and buy something else. Evidently, that didn't adhere to whatever their guidelines are. I thought it was wholly factual and not inflammatory at all.
It's horribly bad. It's really bad. It's terrible. One day somebody will come clean, or it'll be known. But it's really awful. Really
yeah,
awful.
it's not good. Giri Nath, I've added your question. Let's also read comments from. Oh yeah.
I want to remind you, Debbie Levitt, that haters are a KPI. You're doing something good when you're generating haters for no good reason.
I tend to not feel that way, just like I don't really feel like imitation is a sincere form of flattery, because I definitely don't feel flattered by Jared Spool. So let's see. David Snodgrass says, statistical significance is a sampling method to get a scale of subjects that allows you to speak confidently about the whole population. In the digital world, we generally push statistical significance to production because it's easy to fix. UX helps us find a not wrong solution to reduce the risk. Yeah, Solomon says we can't have people knowing the truth about products. They might not buy it. And Chad, good to see Chad here. Chad says, doesn't it just boil down to the answer to this question? Does the action or decision we want to make require statistically significant data? In UX, almost always no. Yeah, I would say, are we making an evidence-based decision? I mean, that's really ultimately what my book is about. My book is about making evidence-based better strategies and better decisions. And if you have good evidence from good qualitative research, the survey is not going to tell you. I've never seen survey results and said, oh, yes, I know exactly what the problem is and I know what to do about it. Said no one ever, because the survey tells me how many and not who, what, where, when, why, or how.
Yeah.
All right.
And that's the real point about statistical significance, right? It's about confidence, genuine confidence. If you're saving a child's life, putting a man on the moon, doing something mission critical, statistical significance or confidence is really important to the teeniest degree, right? It's really small amounts, like super small. We don't work to those levels of tolerances generally in UX, which is why you don't hear us talking about statistical significance, why researchers don't all have to have PhDs, because you go out there and do drug discovery or something that, or and some kind of high-end engineering that means it, they've all got at least 3 PhDs, and it's all, that's what you need to do that high-end work. We're not doing that. We're doing that kind of level work down here at the kind of ground level, making the world a safer place.
There you go. All right, thank you. Question number 2 today says, hi, Debbie, Dr. Nick. Can you give some general guidance on what would be good research questions versus bad? Examples I get at work. Should we make this black and white? And I'm asked to do research.
Oh, gosh. I mean, general guidance. I mean, shit, there's like leading questions or leading the witness, which is the classic one. And that's when people do their own discovery, that's what you watch them doing on the video. It's hysterical. You like the red ones, don't you? That kind of stuff. Yeah, open questions. That's just best practice stuff. Honestly, you can Google that stuff. And there's also a lot. I mean, it's all around bias, effectively, and getting to the heart of the question, and the heart of what you're trying to understand, without necessarily asking directly if that's appropriate. There are times when direct is appropriate. There are times when indirect is more appropriate. Examples I get at work. Should we make this black and white? Yeah, see, that's where things get super funky, and I think this ties into the previous question. There's a lot of preferential user research type questions going on. Right? Like, do they want it black and white? Do they want the red shoes or green shoes? Or should we make a campaign messaging X or Y? This, for me, is starting to get way outside of the area of UX. I mean, it's involving us and we've got something to say, but it's not really our wheelhouse. You're then getting into market research and into much bigger sampling. And when you're into opinion-based stuff and attitude stuff, you really do need big samples, and you really do need to do all the stuff that market research people do. I guess the deeper question that I'm answering is be careful with your research in terms of don't be led on market research expeditions. You know what I'm saying? We're user researchers. We're not market researchers. I hope, Debbie, am I making sense to you at least?
Yes,
Good.
yes,
Fine.
yeah, definitely. I get it. First of all, when I hear a question like, should we make this black and white? Should it have a certain color? Should the corners be more rounded? My question is, don't we have a brand style? Don't we have a brand style or a visual design or a design system? Why are we guessing at colors? We should establish what our stuff looks like, make sure it passes color contrast and colorblind friendliness and all of the usual accessibility things that are important. Why are we guessing at colors of things or how round the corners should be? We should have an established look and feel, whether you want to call it brand or visual design or design system or component library, that should already exist. And ultimately, you can't research these things easily, because what will normally happen is people will send out a survey and they'll say, would you like this button more if it were blue? Or they try to A/B test it. We're going to A/B test the blue button versus the green button with the dancing bear. And they go, oh, wow, look which one won. This one must be better. And sometimes it won just because people haven't seen it before. And they go, oh, look at that. And then once the novelty wears off, it performs just as bad as the other thing because now it isn't new. So I think that we have to ask ourselves, what are we trying to learn here? And can these questions be answered in other ways? I also have a Medium article that might help you. You can Google it. It's called When Better Research Questions Are Still Bad. I think that's the title. Yes. And what happened was there was a crappy Medium article where a non researcher was giving you advice on research questions to ask that he claimed were better, and they were still bad. And so my article goes through some good and bad questions to ask, and especially how to look out for bad questions. So ultimately, I think that it sounds like you know what a good and bad question is because you're asking us about this. You probably don't need us to tell you, should this be black, white, gray, pink, whatever. Doesn't make for a good research question, doesn't make for a good survey, can't predict human behavior, usability, customer centricity from if we built a thing, would you like it better? So I think you have to peel away the onion a little bit on your team and find out, what are we really asking? What problem are we really solving? The problem probably isn't should this be black or white. The problem might be people aren't using a feature we thought they would use. Okay, well, why aren't they using it? It's probably not because of its color. So I would say peel away that onion a little bit and try to learn what's really going wrong here. Is there a feature that isn't getting as much use as we thought? Are our salespeople having trouble? Sellers? There's a real problem somewhere under here that is being masked in the fake presumed solution that a color change is the answer. Yeah. That's what I would say. Okay.
The big problem with your dancing bear example, which happens all the time, is give it to the MVT crew, wait 3 months or something for significance, which was a complete waste of time. Find out there was a dancing bear, and as you said, it's novelty and other good reasons. But most importantly, you don't really know why, right? So you'll say, right, oh, yes, we got 0.2 increase, but you've got no attribution. You've got no understanding what's caused that change. All you know is that we changed it to a blue dancing bear and something went up. That's not good enough. And that's basically too much MVT, or what I call it, or it is known as kind of a fishing expedition. And that never turns out well, because you'll catch something, you'll think it's something, and it isn't much. Overplay it, build to it, bad things happen. Don't do it.
Yep. All right. While I've put up the next question, just a reminder, we are taking your questions live. We're here another hour or so. So if you have a question, drop it in the chat. We'll add it to the list, or send it anonymously at deltacx.com/links. Yeah, I know. Where do I point? I'm doing this 3 years and I still don't know where to point. 3.5 years, I don't know where to point.
There you go.
Serious, I know, so hard. I should just really look at me and try to figure out where my hair is parted and then match it to that. Anyway, here's our next question. Can you advise on making and explaining UX presentations? It sometimes gets too overwhelming.
Well, this is an easy, quick answer. Myself and Dr. Ari Zalmanow have got a course, which you may have seen me talking about on LinkedIn, called The Influential Researcher. And it's all about this. It's all about influencing, impact, making your research heard. Okay, you're right. Doing presentations is scary, daunting, sometimes frustrating, all of those things. Because if you've done all the hard work, and here you are standing in front of a room of people, either physically or on Zoom or what have you, and this is the money shot. This is the delivery. This is what it's all about. If you find anything out and you don't tell anyone and it stays in your head, you might as well not have done anything. Same is true if you then put it into Confluence or your knowledge repository, Dovetail, or any of those. It's still going to probably die in there, right? You have to share it with your mouth and your assets and stuff, right? But it's the presentation which is where it's really at. So half, I would say, of our role as user researchers is presenting our work, presenting our insight, presenting the needs of our users and their pain points. How do you do that? I can give you some quick tips right now. Look at the course. It's on Maven. If you go to maven.com, it's called The Influential Researcher. If you follow me on LinkedIn, you can't miss it, I would imagine. The simple things I've learned from executive creative directors over the years: show, don't tell. People buy with their eyes. The one that I run my life by is draw it in crayons. Right? Don't actually draw it in crayons. Don't literally draw it in crayons. You'll get me in trouble as much as anybody else. But think about, like, your audience are reading Ladybird books. because for all intents and purposes, compared to what you're doing, they are. So you have to break it down ladybird style. And that's not condescending. That's abstraction and simplification. And we're UX folk, okay? If you can't abstract and simplify, work harder, because that's what we do. That's what we do, right? We are simplifiers, ultimately, amongst other hats, but primarily we're simplifiers, which blows my mind that modern day UX is so overcomplicated, because the world that Debbie and I and Darren and many other people come from is a world of beautiful, clean simplicity and getting rid of shit, not putting shit in, right? Or optimizing, making it better. Anyway, I'm rambling. How do you get better at presentations? Do lots of them. Do it more. It's like jumping out of an airplane. It's scary as hell. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. You won't get the adrenaline dump, or you will, and you'll learn to manage it better. After a while, there is no adrenaline dump. Present live on stage. Present on camera. Understand that it's a persona that you're acting and performing with. Okay, you slip into it more easily the more times you do it. Right? Performance. It's a performance. It's a form of acting. So I'm not the same person on stage as I am with my family and friends, because you're a bit more whatever. I still don't put my shoulders back, but that's my ongoing problem. But okay, once you get into that, practice it, keep it simple, you'll get there. That's the bottom line.
Okay,
I hope that helps.
Thanks to everybody who's sending in questions, both in the chat and anonymous. I'm adding you to the list. Just know that the list is getting long, and so we'll get to you when we can. Thank you for your patience. My answer for this, I'm just going to take a different angle to Nick. I don't disagree with him here. I'm just going to answer it in a different way, and that is... when it comes to UX presentations, I think one of the chief mistakes that we make is we did not talk to our teammates or stakeholders or both about what types of information they need. Because ultimately, we want to deliver research that's going to impact their strategies, their decisions, their plans, their priorities. I want to ask them, how do you need to see this research? Do you like long form reports? Do you like PowerPoint slides? Do you like visualizations or maps? Will you watch entire video recordings of sessions, or do you need clip montages, or as Nick sometimes says, show reels? So I think what can sometimes be overwhelming is we don't even know what's going to help our teammates the most, and we end up making everything. And we don't have to make everything. Work with your teammates early in your project to say, okay, if we can get these questions answered for you, and we'll work on getting these questions answered for you, what kinds of maps, documents, spreadsheets would help you most? So that's something that I suggest to help you not feel so overwhelmed. Brett is here and says, I agree with Dr. Nick. Practicing public speaking and presentation, it's the key. It's the way to refine your skills. Been attending some Toastmasters lately. It's a good initial way to practice.
Let me just jump in very quickly.
Please do.
Usually on any team, you're going to have to do a show and tell once, a sprint or a demo or something. And usually everybody's like hiding and putting their hands down. Be the one, put your hand up and volunteer to do it. Or say, I really need to get some presentation practice, and do you mind if I do it this sprint? Actively put yourself out there, get yourself out of the comfort zone. If you screw it up in a sprint or in a town hall or a thing, it's not the end of the world, but you're trying and you're learning, and hopefully everybody will appreciate that. Sorry, Debbie.
No problem. Let's jump to the next question, since now they're coming in wildly. Okay, let me bump this font down. This says, Debbie, Dr. Nick, can we gather folks, limited numbers, around the globe to set authentic UX practices and guidelines under a body of an association or entity to recognize the right way of doing and direct the industry in the right manner to take UX for the next generation? Oh, I got answers. Nick, what's your thought on this?
Yeah, I'm saying ISO 9241. It's not UX, it's HCI, but
yeah,
good enough. It's an international standard. What more do you want? Yeah, exactly. It's good. It's near as damn it. The problem is that international standards are like the uncoolest thing in the world, and they're really ultra dry, and everybody hates them. And all I know is 9241 because it's burned in my brain. go into the details, and I haven't touched it since my master's degree, right? It's really dry. It's like legal speak for creatives or for designers type thing, and it's like, yikes, it's just not nice. But it's rock solid. That's the difference. It's super robust, ultra tested, and it's very standard around the world. We just don't do any of it, or not any of it in the UX world. But if you want standards, it's all there. With all of this stuff is adoption, right? There are design folks out there. I'm not going to pull punches here. There are design leaders out there who are just nailing their colors to the mast and are prepared to go down on that ship. And people like Debbie, Darren, lots of other people, we've been fighting that war for probably 5, 6, 7 years now. I think we might be starting to win, but we'll see. We'll see. I don't want to sound too optimistic because we've taken an absolute pelting, but we'll see.
Yeah,
We'll see.
so my answer to this is I just saw UXPA Austria is trying to do an interesting certification that is unlike ones that I've seen before. Do I think it'll take hold? Maybe, but I think the real missing piece here is the business side, because we can call it a diploma, we can say someone's certified, we can give you a badge, we can give you a number, we can give you good education, we can give you bad education. If businesses still don't understand what any of us do, all of that won't matter. It won't matter if you and I and Nick and Darren and Larry and the baby Jesus get together and say, this is what a good UX practitioner looks like, if businesses still think we make pretty screens in half a day. And so ultimately, to me, this still falls on UX leaders, whether they are in senior roles, lead, manager, director, head, whatever the hierarchy looks like in your country. If those people are not standing up for good UCD and HCD done well, and if they're saying yes to design thinking and yes to design sprints and yes to lean UX and yes to the least UX we can do in the least amount of time, yes to surveys over qual research, none of this matters. It won't matter if I've been certified. It won't matter if I have a master's or a PhD. It won't matter if I'm the best freaking practitioner on the planet if companies don't get what we do and we're the first to be laid off. So to me, it still goes back to our leaders, who in some cases are just burned out, and in some cases have tried, and in some cases haven't tried to fight the good fight for UX. And in some cases, they've tried and done the wrong thing. They brought in design thinking, or they brought in these cheap, discount, fast, speed over quality ways to do UX. And now they're calling me in saying, help, how do I get my company out of their workshop addiction? So to answer your question, I think what the UXPA Austria is doing is interesting, but it only matters as much as the way business perceives what we do and how we do it. Mm-hmm. Because we're problem finders and problem solvers. Go ahead.
Yeah. Look what happened with General Assembly. Right? People bouncing around with all kinds of training and certificates and stuff. It doesn't mean anything, It just, you're certifying people in unconscious. Not great.
Not great. Okay, moving on. Hi, Debbie and Nick. I'm about to start a new UX researcher role in the public sector in the UK. Maybe you got Nick's old job. Do you have any advice about how I can advocate for budget and one-on-one mentoring and further training? Nick, you've worked in those environments. Do you have any advice there? Shweta, I'll add your question to the list.
Hi. I'm just coming off of literally my recent stint is three years in the public sector in the UK. Okay, forget budgets because it's central government and government is just cost constrained. Okay, but that absolutely will not stop you learning. In fact, it's not about getting budget for training and one-to-one mentoring. The one-to-one mentoring which you can get is through the cross-government Slack. I would make sure that once you land whichever department you're in, you join that Slack chat, that Slack community, the cross-government Slack. and get to understand which channels you need to be in, meet people, you will quite quickly find people who can and will be able to mentor you. There are also, there used to be in-house training programs when GDS was a thing, but now it's the CDDO. I don't know what the latest is. You'll need to find out. But our government is really good about learning and development and training. It just isn't about budget. It's so because money. So, but there are people. There's a ton of knowledge. You'll do really great user research in central government. It's the best place to learn and get better, because they do great. The way that user research is done in British government, or the way the standards dictate, is really great. It's pretty archaic and it needs some updating, and it's open to all kinds of interpretation, but it's light years ahead of anything else. And the person that was talking about standards earlier on, you want standards? Google Government Digital Service standard, right? Government GDS standard, and you'll find a 14-point standard. Have a look at that. That is a guide for life, for UX and delivery life, or software engineering life, or whatever you want to call it. Those are great principles and they work. The arguments that I get into are all about the interpretation of them, and everybody's got an opinion, and central government gets tricky because you've got to apply those in all kinds of different contexts, and some of them don't flex, some of them are really flexible, all kinds of stuff. So basically, good luck with it. Keep your head down and your ears open kind of thing, because it's really it can be a really overwhelming environment. Get a lay of the land first before you sort of, and a mentor will help you immensely. Good luck.
Cool. Yeah, and what I would add to that, because again, I'm not familiar with the UK public sector, but if I can plug myself for a moment, I do charge for coaching. I charge $100 an hour, which is about $50 a half hour, which probably translates decently into pounds. A lot of my coaching clients are paying out of pocket, because it's not a wild rate and they can see me as much as they want or as little as they want. And I do have discounts for people who buy blocks of hours and then they work against them. So, so you can end up paying as little as $85 an hour for me if you get a block of 10 hours. So in some cases, if you don't think you can get that budget, but you still really want that coaching, see if you can find an affordable coach, who could be me or could be somebody else. Shop around. So that would be my suggestion. But if you really feel like you need that mentoring or coaching, I would, go for it. Talk to some people and just see what you can afford, even if they're not giving you much or any budget around it. Okay, now we're getting lots of questions coming in, so I'm going to move to the next one, which might have a similar answer. Hey, Debbie and Nick, I've been in the UX field about 8 years. I now manage a team. I don't have formal education, certifications, books and such only. Do you recommend a degree? If not, what do you recommend?
Interesting way you phrased that. You don't need a formal education. You don't need any formal qualifications in UX. I think that's really established. All the people that I looked up to, okay, some of them had university stuff, but I don't think it's necessarily what made them who they were. And I don't think anybody's been held back by not having a university qualification. Okay, it's not a barrier to entry or a barrier to progression. That's an absolute given. From my perspective, as a PhD guy who leans all my weight is not on my PhD. I'm leaning on my psychology undergraduate degree. I'm a massive proponent of a big fan of the psychology undergraduate degree, the BSc, mind you, not the BA, not that hipster hippy dippy garbage. A Bachelor of Science in psychology. If you've got a BA in psych, I'm sorry, but not sorry at all. BSc psychology. If you were going to go back to university and you had a yen to kind of, learn something after doing 8 years on the job, a psychology undergraduate degree is only ever going to inform you and pay you back time and time again. It underpins everything that I do, and it always has done from day one, even when I was completely green behind the ears as a fresh out of PhD kind of no UX guy. It just, I don't know how people do UX without the psychology stuff, but hey, that's just me. So yeah, I think that's all I've got to say on it. You don't need it if you want to get something. UX is great. I would add, I didn't get anything from my HCI degree, or nowhere near as much as I wanted to get. It wasn't what I thought it would be. I know mine was done, 10, 15 years ago, and they've probably upgraded them all a lot since then. But just double check. I don't see that. I see lots of people spending a lot of money on HCI degrees, HCI master degrees, and I guess maybe it does open some doors, but in terms of practical use on the job, the knowledge, I don't really know. I'm not sure. I don't think it's great value, to be honest. But check with somebody who's done one in more recent years, and double check me. I'm old in that regard.
Hold on, I have to put up the official animation of old.
Oh, you calling me a dinosaur?
Or
But I like it's a
one.
velociraptor or something evil. Oh, okay.
Okay, so to add to that, I think the question is, what are you trying to get better at? Because I certainly agree with Nick that you don't really need a formal education. You've gotten where you've gotten over 8 years. You've worked your way up to management. I assume I don't know your LinkedIn. So when you talk about like, what do I need now? My question is, what problem are you trying to solve? So he says he or she says or they says I was looking at going back for psychology, but I thought BA. Thank you for the BS recommendation. Yes, HCI is the big trend I'm seeing as well. Yeah, I agree that you can't go wrong studying psychology, whether it's books or courses or the degree. I also want to be viable for other job postings, such as. Nardine says, as an Egyptian, I am proud of this sticker. Thank you. Malika says, I just started doing A-level psychology. I might be able to get a degree. At least it's something. They require degrees. Yeah, I don't know what other job postings you're looking for. Do you mean higher level management or leadership in UX? That's part of why I did an MBA, because I already have a bachelor's degree, though it's in music, so it's not relevant. I did a bunch of psych courses in college for fun. That's my psych background. So yes, if they're looking for that, I would say take a look at master's degrees. And again, if you live in the type of region of the world where they're super serious about having certain degrees for certain jobs, then you have to match that up. If they want to see a director of UX who has an HCI degree or a human factors education or an MBA, then you're picking from what your region wants to see. The Bachelor of Science might not be enough if they're looking for advanced degrees. So that was one reason why I did the MBA, because I found an MBA program. I don't love the MBA program that I did, but I'm happy to have finished it and have the letters after my name for these types of reasons. So you just have to look for some MBA programs that will give you what you're looking for if they're the jobs you want to move into are expecting master's degrees. Otherwise, Nick is right. The bachelor's in science of psychology is a good choice. So let me find our next question. Oh, and of course, I also wanted to plug my coaching again, just because depending upon what you need, I can't give you a master's degree, but I do also coach leaders. So if you need some coaching there, you can also poke me about that. Okay, next question says.
Just before you do that,
Malika.
Malika, you're doing your A level in psychology. That's amazing. And if you were to go on to do an undergraduate, as we just suggested, by the time you graduated and came out into the UX world again, we may actually be doing behavioral design by then. In which case, you'll be shit hot, pardon my French, but that would be great, right? That's what I've been waiting 10, 15 years for. That's what I came out in the world to do, was behavioral design, and UX UI killed the party, but it's coming back. It's inevitable. You can't not be doing behavioral design. It's just we've just delayed it. So keep on at it. I mean, I reckon behavioral scientists in 10 years' time are going to be money.
Yes.
So
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, Malika. I didn't know you were doing it. And Malika is absolutely a current star and a future star. Everybody watch out for Malika. You're already familiar with some of her visual design work.
Ooh, very nice work, madam.
For sure. So everyone keep an eye on Rising Star, Malika. Okay, so next question. I have a UX design resume and portfolio. However, my visual design skills need a lot of improvement in terms of making it more modern day looking. My question is, should I apply for UX research jobs for the time being? I enjoy doing research more than the design.
Yeah, that was me back in the day. That was me in 2009, 2010. Like research boy, like now do design. I'm like, what? Shit, what do I need to do? Right. And so, yeah, I know exactly that feeling because I don't know, for people like me, I came up the science route. I've never done a day of art in my life or held a pen or shown any aptitude for drawing, sketching. Do you know what I mean? That me growing up, that was never me. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, right, you got to wireframe this stuff, or even go up the fidelity scale and do stuff in hi-fi. Okay. Should I apply for? Yeah. This is so up to you and whether you have got it in you. This is a personality or whatever you're up to it. The only way you're going to get better is by failing and making a hash of things and doing it under a mentored wing, right? You're not going to get better at design in a research role. Let's face it, right? So if you want to get better at UX design or focus in the design side of things rather than the research side, that's great, but you need to be in a support structure with appropriate mentoring, appropriate skills around you, and appropriate seniors. Do you see what I'm saying? Otherwise, trying to learn that stuff on your own and blagging it is no fun. The client, stakeholders, show and tells ripping into you. I've seen it happen live, and it's ugly. It's not good for your health, your mental health. That make mistakes around your immediate family, if you know what I mean, your team, your seniors and your leads. That's where it's a safe space to do that stuff. So that's up to you. If you really are into research, then go the research route, right? Design and research are both very nuanced, tricky things. You have to have experience in them, right? In the same way that Debbie and I preach about research, about UX being experiential and the research side of things, well, so is design in exactly the same ways, just differently, if you know what I mean. So you've got to get that experience and that mentoring and make those mistakes in a safe way to be able to get better at either. Make a choice.
Cool. And my short addition to this answer would be, do you qualify? If you are unlikely to qualify for a research job, then probably don't apply. So just because you like doing research doesn't necessarily mean that you will qualify for a research job. So I would say take a look at research jobs, look at the skills that they are asking for or requiring, see if your portfolio tells a story that matches what these people are looking for, and then sure, you can apply. But if it's ultimately you like research and you're just starting to get into it, but it's not your strength, it's not really in your portfolio, then either you're looking for a very junior research job or this isn't the right thing for you. So it's hard for me to say because I don't know who you are or what you're doing or whatever, but that's what I would be looking at. So it sounds like you, depending upon where you are in the universe of proficiency, you might want to either be working on improving some visual design skills, which are marketable skills, I guess, until AI takes it over, or I don't know what to think anymore. Or improving your research skills so that you're a more viable candidate there. But knowing that nearly 100,000 UX practitioners, many of them researchers, have been laid off in the past almost year, I know that trying to get a research job right now is harder than ever because there are fewer jobs and more well-qualified candidates. So I think you just have to take a look at where you're located, what your strengths are, what story your portfolio tells, and maybe apply in that direction, at least for the short term, while the economy is ugly and you might not have as much choice. That's just my realism answer there. Sorry. Okay, next question. This came from, I think, the live chat, so hopefully our person is still here. We are in a cycle where we have our designer finish a high-fidelity mock-up of a new feature or module, and then we figure out what we want to test, then build a clickable prototype, and go to usertesting.com. I feel like we're out of order, but also feel pressure to not break the rhythm. We're getting decent insights, but I'm wondering what red flags come to mind for you. Ooh, I like this one. Yes, definitely some red flags for me. Oh, sorry. Let me put the question back up. Nick was reading it.
Yeah.
I went animation silly.
No. Quick pre-question. Quick question. Is this a Figma prototype?
Ah, that is a good question. Let's see. Who asked that? I have to roll back. Let's see. Matt, who's in the middle of reading my book. Matt, are you still here? Matt, joining us from LinkedIn. Matt, you make a prototype. Is it a Figma prototype?
Is it Figma? Is it Axure? Is it InVision? Is
Framer.
it Code? Is it...
Matt says, of
Framer.
course. So I'm assuming
Figma.
that's Figma. Oh, I don't have the womp, 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 wah sound, but I do have a gong. But that doesn't make sense here.
So now we can reinterpret this question. Right? Figma can be... I'm coming round to Figma, but not like this, right? Okay, let's reinterpret this question. We're in a cycle, basically. We keep doing the same thing, where these people are building the thing, and then building a shonky prototype to try to validate their confirmation bias with people who are already a really biased pool, right? Something like that, right? Shit, you poor person. Sorry, Matt. How can you possibly know? I've got so many questions. I'm not even going to do this, but how could you possibly know? Okay, Matt, if you're here, what's a typical research question of this prototype? Is it, can you buy the red shoes? Or is it, do you like this website? Is it something really transactional and functional, or is it more brochure-y and informative?
Yeah, and remember, LinkedIn is 20 to 40 seconds behind, so it might take a moment for Matt to register and respond.
Hang on.
I know.
Hang on. We're getting decent insights. Yeah, I mean, this thing is littered with red flags. This is just like a red flag minefield. But I don't know any details, so it depends, you know. This could be a reasonable approach. I don't want to slate it without knowing too much. But when you've got a Figma thing, and what can you possibly really learn from it? It's really limited. Usertesting.com, the audience is super duper biased. If you're using your own recruits, great, but their pool is a bunch of housebroken puppies kind of thing. They are trained to do a thing, right? They come in and say stuff that, yes, there you go, that's exactly right, to get their little $10 and move along to the next paid gig that they're after. It's not... When you say
did you see what Matt said?
Insight,
they watch them go through the clickable prototype and see where they get stuck.
Yeah. Okay.
And Clarissa said, I had a similar issue. I had to get to a stage within the project where I had my own work stream and had to push in my research plan to do the research first and then do lo-fi prototypes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, Chad's asking the question. That was the question I was just asking. How do you know it's any good? You've got no idea. You're flying so blind on so many different levels, on the Figma level, on the usertesting.com pool level. And I'm going to listen, like Matt, I don't want to rip into your script, but I'd love to see that script. I'd love to see what questions you're asking and how, and what behavior you're trying to elicit. Or is it more using Figma as a stimulus for discussion, in which case it's all self-reported instead of behavioral, in which case that's a major red flag. That's my biggest why Figma is crap argument. because people have to invent things because the prototype doesn't support the behavior. And when people start making stuff up or constructing it, it's a lot less valid or reliable than observed behavior, which you get with something like Axure or actual code or what have you. Matt, that's a difficult one to ask. There's a lot going on there. I think I've covered it in enough ground. But if you want to, Matt, PM me on LinkedIn. I'll happily talk to you privately on this one.
Yeah, let me jump in on this one too. And obviously, Matt, sign up for free coaching. I do half-hour free for everybody. I can talk to you about this too. Talk to Dr. Nick too. deltacx.link/coaching. Everybody gets one free. Then I start charging you. So what I would say is to me, the best order for things would be full fidelity mock-ups last, because I can't get too worked up about how pretty it is if I don't know if we've solved the right problem and solved it well. Now, if you have a brand, if you have a design system, if you have a component library, a UI kit, then okay, you could design and prototype in higher fidelity because you already know what the components will look like. It's not like we have no idea what these will look like and the visual designer is going to do this later. But I think having the visual designer do something high fidelity first is not the right first step, because we don't even know if the solution is going in the right direction. So normally I start in medium fidelity, where it's organized, it has good information architecture, it's laid out well, but it doesn't have all of the final colors or typography or stock photos. It's got some placeholders and things like that. Then I'll usually want to bring that to usability testing. But as Nick pointed out, I'm not in Figma. I'm in Axure. Now, I've got 16 hours of free Axure lessons up on YouTube. Just come on over here to YouTube. Please subscribe, and please check out the Axure playlist, where you can learn Axure up to a solid intermediate level and for free. Axure, if you want your usability testing to be good, then you have to use a prototyping tool that lets you build realistic prototypes. Figma is what we call a click-through model. Can people go clickety-click-click and move through a path you've predefined? You will end up seeing if people can move through a path you've predefined, but you won't really have a good sense of usability because they can't type in a box. I must be missing something. They can't type in a box. I love how Axure has conditional logic and variables and other things that allow me to think like a programmer and make something that is functionally more realistic or complex, but it's low code, no code, so I don't have to be a programmer. So to me, Axure is worth it, but I would say unless you have a design system where you already know how this is going to look, I wouldn't be putting the high fidelity polish on it until the end, because then you're wasting that cycle with your visual designer, because chances are when you run this through usability testing, there's all sorts of problems, from small incremental changes to holy crap, this really doesn't work for people.
Yeah,
we didn't solve the right problem. Yeah, we didn't solve the right problem. The execution of this idea stinks. We need to execute this idea differently. So I'm in an effort to play to people's strengths and work more efficiently. Here's my efficiency triangle. Work more efficiently and save time. We want to balance the customer's needs with how fast our teams are trying to go, with the idea that we want to cut risk and waste. And I think that having the visual designer work so much before we even know if this is a good design is waste and risk that we can cut. We still need that person. We're not firing them. We're just reorganizing the process. So that's what I would say. And by the way, I put in the same bucket as Figma, Adobe XD, InVision, Any of these things that are just click through models where you go from this button to this screen to this screen to this partial screen, these are not realistic in that they're not interactively realistic. People say, but it looks just like the final thing. I'm not talking about visually realistic, I'm talking about interactively realistic. If people can't do the wrong thing and get an error message, this isn't realistic. If people can't fill out a form, this isn't realistic. So take a look at that. And so I would say it sounds like what you're doing is not in the right order and can be producing a lot of wasteful cycles, which will probably also skew how your teammates see UX. So I think it is worth saying something, and it is worth talking about, because then people will think UX is slow time wasters. All right, we've got 4 more questions. Let's see. Let's take a look at the next one. Hold on, I'm just copy pasting. Everybody knows I'm slow. And here we go. And Nardine, I'll put that question on the end since we like to answer everything that comes in order. Okay, this question says, how do you decide which battles to pick as a UXer without sounding adversarial? This question is about giving in for the longer relationship building, but you also want to set good UX practices. I've accidentally annoyed my team at times by stating the need for testing, and now I can see the phrasing and ask could have been more team-centric. Okay, Dr. Nick, how do you suggest we pick our battles?
I love this question. Great question, whoever asked it. It's a
I think it was
good question
Shweta.
to ask. It's a really good question to ask because it's a good skill to have, and I'm not sure I'm that great at it because I just fight them all. But that's not necessarily a good thing. That's just me and my style. I totally understand your conundrum with not just wanting to set good UX practices, but be able to get good experience yourself, right? That's what we're ultimately talking about. Is, you know, we need to set up the road for ourselves to get the right experience to be able to progress in our careers. When you said I've accidentally annoyed my team at times, I was applauding you, because I think if you're not upsetting your team at times, you're probably not doing your job as a UXer, as a user researcher, right? And I'm not saying that you should set out to upset anybody, but we are reporting back things that are often not things that people want to hear, you know? And so we are the bearers of bad news, you know, people do want to shoot the messenger. So that's okay. That's kind of a professional hazard or whatever, occupational hazard type thing. You know, it's no big deal, and we all get it, and that's okay. And you kind of get used to that in a bit. You'll, again, talking about personas, you'll develop a kind of a persona. I do it in a more joking way because it fits with my neurodiversity as a kind of a jester to challenge this stuff, right? I use humor to kind of do some of the challenge, sometimes inappropriate, but you find your own way of doing it. But the point is you can't sit there and watch bad things happen, especially when you know good things. You've got the insight or you know a better way of doing things. The last bit you say there, and I can see now about the phrasing and could have been more team-centric. That's for real, and I can see that somebody has pulled you aside, like a team lead or a delivery lead, has said to you, hey, you know what, could you just not talk quite like that? I understand what you're saying, but that was a bit harsh in the retro. I've had that. Many people have had that too. Do moderate your language and be careful about it, but also don't pull your punches sometimes, right? And sometimes there's no easy way to do this stuff, and you just got to suck it up, take a deep breath, you know, and go for it. And honestly, I think I've won more. I've definitely won more times than I've lost, and that's what has made me successful. Frankly, is knowing when to push and when to. What do they say? When to twist and when to hold.
You
Like
gotta
when to.
know when to
Yeah, that's
hold
the one.
'em.
That's the one. But you got to know when to STFU and when to fight your fight. And I know you're asking me when that is. You'll get a sense of it because some of these issues are so fundamental. Like, let's just release that thing without testing it. You know, red alert. That's when you speak up. You know, some of the, you know, or we know about our users and all of some of that gumph that you would have heard Debbie and lots of people talk about. So you'll know. Just it's about the courage of your convictions and just trust your instincts. And when you get it wrong, you'll learn. No big deal.
And what I would add to that, because I don't disagree, is I find that one thing that helps a lot of people and I think has worked really well for me is I try to not say you or I in these situations. I try to not say, well, you, or well, I think, or I want, or I whatever, or you're doing this. Take out all the yous and I's and make everything we. And focus on we're a team. So then you can say things like, we probably would benefit from having more knowledge before we just go and design this. We use we because, yeah, you're including yourself and you might feel like, I don't want to include myself. This is true about them, not me. Whatever. It's the team. You want to be more team centric? Then your pronoun is we. Your pronoun is we. We can make better decisions when we have better evidence about our users and their needs and their tasks. We will understand how to prioritize these things if we'd studied our customers a little bit more and understood how they prioritize these things. We. Otherwise, I certainly agree with Nick. I tend to fight more battles than I don't, but I tend to win more battles than I don't. And when I don't, I have trained myself to disconnect, like from the sense of I'm not going to let it get to me. You know, maybe it bugs me that day, and then I walk away and I go, okay, that's the decision they want to make. Let's document that. Let's document that I tried to warn them that the building would catch on fire and burn to the ground. I'll just document that I warned them about that, and they decided this, and let's just move on. And if somebody's trying to hold someone accountable later, which almost never happens, you can say, well, here's my notes on the project. I tried to warn people about boop bop a beep, and they said, don't worry, it'll be fine. So I didn't, I tried, but I didn't want to push. The end. So that's some advice there. Thank you again, Shweta, for the cool question.
Shweta, my top advice is just do it anyway. And that's always my advice to most questions. Just do it anyway. Just do. What have you got to lose? Right? Very little. And everything to gain. Just don't do it anything illegal, immoral, unethical. Okay? If you're doing things with the right heart and it's for the good of the thing, go maverick, go rogue. Because towing some of these organizations is exactly what keeps them in this ridiculous stasis, right? In this kind of purgatory of bad, of just average, right? Be exceptional. Take some risks. Just don't hurt anyone or do anything dangerous.
Well said. Okay, next question says, hello, everyone. This is my first time here. Welcome. And I have a question. What do you do when you have a language barrier between you and your customers?
I don't think I've had one yet. Because I wouldn't be the researcher doing it because it's not my language and I can't communicate with them. You know what? I was at Eurostar, which is a transcontinental train service which runs between the UK and mainland Europe. I did a whole bunch of, we did a session in Gare du Nord, which is the big thing in Paris. My French is okay. It's schoolboy French. It's not conversational or fluent. But I was doing kiosk usage for a ticket machine. And so it was interesting to see. I didn't need the language stuff because it was all behavioral, and behavior is it's not universal, but I speak the language of behavior better than I do the language of French. If there is a language barrier between you and your customers, I guess you can run a translator or all that kind of stuff, but ideally you'd have somebody who is culturally and from a language perspective that person. If you're not, it doesn't seem right to be putting. It just doesn't seem the right researcher to the right research question, if you know what I mean. Yeah, Debbie.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that in general, we want to make sure that we have researchers who speak the language of the audience and come from that culture. We go into this a bit in chapter 24 in my book with my interview with Seth Mbele, who talks about some of the downsides when people try to interview people for whom they have little knowledge or cultural reference or don't speak the language, then ultimately I tell people you deal with the customer in the language in which they use your system. If they are using your system in Mandarin, you should be talking to them in Mandarin. If they are using the system in German, you should be speaking to them in German. If they are Filipino but they use the system in English, you can speak to them in English. You don't have to speak to them in a Filipino language. So that is usually my guideline on language, but that usually means that the companies I've been involved with try to hire for the people who speak those languages so that the research can be conducted in those languages, then the research can be understood in those languages, and then the designers can design with the good research knowledge and also design in those languages, because it wouldn't make sense for you to design. I mean, you could design in English and then someone translates it into Mandarin, but that's not necessarily the best way.
And you know what? When we on that example I used at Eurostar, there was a hybrid or mixed team of English and French researchers, specifically for that reason, because it's an Anglo-French company looking at King's Cross and Gare du Nord or another stuff. So it may you've got cultural variance covered within the team.
Yeah, so I don't really know how to fix that language barrier. When I worked last year for Stepstone/Total Jobs, we ran into that because half the team was English speaking and half the team was German speakers because of the Stepstone side of things. And it just meant that the researchers ended up doing a lot of the research in German and would have to give a lot of translations to the team who then designed things in English because the product was also going out to the UK for Total Jobs, and then someone else had to translate it into German so that it made sense for that market. That's some really complicated stuff, but that's sometimes how it's done. We have a follow-up question from Clarissa who says, do you need to understand the words they're saying, or is there a trick to choosing a different method of engagement if you don't have a native speaker of the language? No, I think you've got to understand the words they're saying, or at least have a researcher who can speak to them in that language and then give you that readout. It's why I don't apply for UX researcher jobs in Italy. My Italian is conversational, but I don't believe my Italian is at the level where I could conduct a UX research session comfortably. If I were doing work for an Italian company, I would want to be paired with an Italian researcher or my husband or someone for whom it is even if it's not their native language, who is someone who is fluent. I'm not yet fluent.
Yeah. That said, I would love to try to do like a native Mandarin on a Mandarin site. I'd love to try that, just to see. You know what I'm saying? I don't even know what I would need somebody to help me set up to understand the success conditions, and you know what I mean. It had to be something really mechanical, like not cognitive, like not preferential. It would be, could you buy the red shoes, please? You know what I'm saying? It would have to be a very evaluative type thing. I'd love to try it because I bet you, just from a behavioral standpoint, I think it'd be fascinating to see how that would go if you don't have language. But that's just me being a kind of site geek.
Groovy. Okay, so the next question says, I have opposite views regarding this question. When, in your opinion, do you have researchers in design and design decision meetings? Where do you find UX researcher mentors? Okay, that's two separate questions rolled into one. So let's feel free to take them as two questions and address them separately. I'll put a little space between them. Nick, when should researchers be in design and design decision meetings?
Well, the simple answer is all the time, but then the flip answer is what's a design decision meeting? Because if you're having one of those kind of shindigs, like research should be there, but didn't research inform design? Well, and what's going on here? Like, why is it us and them? That's so weird. The whole question feels like. Sorry, I'm not slating the question asker at all, right? It's just fielding a question like that feels weird because it's just like.
I thought
it's
some of the
like you
same
asked.
things.
It just feels uncomfortable. It's weird. Like it shouldn't. You guys are on the same team. You're on the same product team. Like what? It shouldn't be us and them. Like there's something wrong going on there. Like you should all be in, not all be in all each other's meetings. That's ridiculous. But if you're having a research and design meeting, it makes absolute sense to have the UX team there, i.e., or research, design, and content. You know? Yeah. Do you want to handle that one? Then we'll do part two separately.
Yeah, I think that like Nick said, you can't have everybody in every meeting. Nobody's got time for that. So you're going to have to pick and choose. I agree. If
I'm just going
research,
for pee. 2
yeah,
seconds. 2
have
seconds. I
fun.
need to pee.
If research should have been involved in making sure design has all of the evidence and knowledge they would need to work on their designs and make good design decisions. So I think that there are times when designers can collaborate with the researchers and call them back in and say, hey, I designed this. Do you believe that this best matches what you learned in the research? But again, that doesn't have to be a design meeting or a design decision. Like, I'm not that formal about these things. That to me can be an unplanned 15-minute quick video call or something. So I think that we do want to make sure there's ongoing collaboration between researchers and designers, but I don't feel like they have to check each other's work. Am I addressing this? I forgot who asked this or how it came in. And I think we have another one coming in anonymously now. But let's see. Yeah. Okay. Okay, we have an anonymous question coming in now. I'm adding it to the bottom of the list, and then I don't know if we'll still have time for all of these. But yeah, you can have these people in these meetings whenever everybody agrees it's a good idea. Like, I don't think there is a hard rule here to follow. Yeah, I was just saying, I don't think there's a hard rule to follow. You just want good collaboration between designers and researchers. And maybe if designers are doing peer review or critique, maybe the researcher doesn't need to be there. And I would probably say you need to collaborate with your researcher before it's a design decision. You want to make sure that that you've collaborated with your researcher before you're coming to a final design decision. That's my thought on that.
But I've been in so many of those kinds of meetings with designers when they're doing designer stuff, right, proper designer stuff like fontography and stuff, right? It's really interesting to be in those meetings, and there are times when you may have something to offer, and other times it's just really interesting to be exposed to that stuff just professionally. I also would say that culturally, from my perspective, it just doesn't make sense to have that kind of us and them. If you're going to have a design discussion, unless it's a really ultra major one, why can't you have it in the open of your agile squad, team, pod, whatever you want to call it? You see what I'm saying? Because they're your family, they're they're your work family, they're your immediate team. I don't know. It doesn't seem like a very functional working team when it's like that, when all these component parts of that pod should be working together to the sprint goals. Call me old-fashioned.
I will not. Sorry, just messaging someone who's looking for my help. Anyway, I hope that helps the person who asked. We have so many more questions coming in, so I'm going to move on to the second half of this person's question, which was, where do you find UX researcher mentors?
I have no idea, but when you find them, let me know, because I will point everybody in that direction.
Why aren't you pointing everyone to me?
Oh, sorry, Debbie Levitt. Debbie Levitt is the person you want to go to for all your UX mentoring.
Thanks.
I'll tell you something for free though. Be very careful about ADP list.
Oh, agree.
I'm going to come straight out and say that. I'm going to say it straight up. I'm not saying every mentor on ADP list is a sham, because that's not true. But I've done some background checks on a few people that have made some really shonky LinkedIn posts, like, I'm pleased to announce that I'm now a mentor on ADP. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, let me just go and have a look.
Yeah,
And
with
just
10 minutes of
and
experience.
yeah, exactly that, Debbie. Exactly that. And you're thinking, oh shit, and that's 10 minutes of experience at one or two companies. So very narrow experience and very short experience, like narrow and shallow. Really not mentorship material. And those sorts of people will fill your head with garbage, and then you're going to build on garbage. It's bad. It's really bad. They need to do a lot better in their vetting. And I think they need to raise their standards. I don't think anybody can mentor unless you've got a minimum of 5 years, minimum of validatable 5 years, not this backwritten bullshit lie stuff that people do. Oh yeah, I've been a product manager since 2005. You know, that stuff. I've been in UX UI since 1997. You know, there's too much of that going on. What those morons don't realize is there are people like us who were there who know that those titles didn't exist at those times. Anyway, I digress. Where do you find a good research mentor? If I were you, ask on LinkedIn, try to find people that post things you like. Unfortunately, generally, lots of people with lots of followers are being inundated with the same questions. People like Debbie and others are able to offer mentorship. I can't. I've got a family, jobs, side hustles, all kinds of shit I'm trying to, do. I just can't. But I do training programs. So look on Maven for the influential researcher.
Very true. Don't forget to look at that, everybody. Yeah, my advice on mentors, and we did a show about mentors generally, not necessarily design or research, is start with the people who you trust. If there's someone you follow on LinkedIn or social media who you really admire, you think they're strong and smart and experienced and have something to offer you, write to them. Hey, do you do any free mentoring? Do you do any paid coaching? See what they say and see if they say it's paid, see if you can afford it. But I say start with the people you like and trust. And some people are afraid to approach people. I think you can always approach people. People do write to me sometimes and say, hi, I think you're cool. I wish you would please mentor me for free. I would love for you to mentor me for free, please, please. And I have to say no. I have to say, unfortunately, I can't. I already have some people I mentor for free now. I can't add more. I do paid coaching. If you can budget for some sessions, I'm happy to give you paid time, but there's only so much of my time I can give for free. Sometimes those people are interested in the paid time, and many times they're not. So totally up to you what your standards are. But I tell people start with the people you like and you trust and you admire, because they might do mentoring or coaching.
Yeah, one big thing to add to that. For some reason, well, for good reason, because of the gold rush and because of the way that the world is set up today, knowledge transfer isn't happening downwards the way it should do. But what I'm trying to say is you should expect mentorship as part of the job that you're on, that you're at.
True.
Okay. It shouldn't be an exceptional thing that everyone is paying for or doing out of hours work for, all of this stuff. In the design world that all of these people have come from, they got to art and creative directors by being mentored up that creative ladder, up the design ladder. Well, UX is exactly the same. Expect it with the job. If you don't have it at the job and you can't get it at the job, I would really strongly recommend that you start to look for somewhere. And I know finding a job is shitty and difficult and horrible these days, but when they ask you, have you got any questions for us? Your number one question is how are you structured, set up for internal learning and mentorship here? What are the quality of your seniors like, your leads? How long have they been doing this for? What brand have they done? What sort of work have they done? Are they prepared to mentor me? Have they got, have they got space for it? All of those sorts of questions, because that's where the real learning, not how much conference budget am I going to get, or do you get fruit or beer on Fridays? Those sorts of things. Expect mentorship with a job. I don't think any of us are demanding it. And if you're putting in the hard graft, the least that an employer can do for you is put a decent senior in place to give you progression.
Yep, I like it. Very true. Okay, yeah. And Ana Lucia says, well, I'm a UX team of one. Right. That's why you have to look outside of your job for who might be able to do mentoring or coaching. Okay, next question. Dear presenters, I'm thinking about a more systematic approach to user interview analysis, something that'll help standardize UX research at my team and amongst others at our company. Any suggestions?
I suppose the obvious one that springs to mind, which is pretty standard, is coding or thematically coding. You can call that affinity analysis or whatever that sort of thing. But that is a very common way, or I've always done it that way from coming out of the lab when we used to be in labs and drawing stuff on a whiteboard. You know what I mean? And then drawing a line across the insight at the top, or through the insight, the common insight, by themes. So that's a nice, easy way to standardize it across your team. In our world of remote analysis, having Miro and Mural and those sorts of things also quite handy, actually. One of those things that the remote collaborative thing that the pandemic basically kind of helped along, instead of all standing around whiteboards and all that kind of stuff. If that might be a decent suggestion to help you standardizing that kind of analysis side of things on your team, if you've got a range of experience on that team.
Yeah, and I think that interview analysis, sometimes it starts with our methods. And then it's also, do we use any tools to try to simplify or organize or capture what we're doing with these methods? So you might say, we affinity diagram this way and we spend this much time on it and we use this tool. Or we transcribe in Dovetail and we do some coding and tagging in Dovetail. Again, as usual, not sponsored. I pay these companies, they don't pay me. These are just tools I happen to use. Yeah, I would say come up with a playbook. This is a great opportunity for a process playbook where you can say, this is how UX research is done. And I would say, explain all of UX research. Don't just say, well, this is how analysis is done. Do yourself a favor, and while you are standardizing things and coming up with a more systematic, efficient, but thorough way to do things, look at the whole research process, all of the phases, all of the tasks, and write a playbook on how it's done. Make sure you specify that UX researchers own this, and that if you are democratizing or having other people do research, that there is oversight from the UX department, that there are standards that have to be met. So I would say write up that playbook and make sure it says all the things you need. Don't put things in there that you're going to ask me later how to evangelize to fix. Nick.
Okay, I'm going to break some rules right now.
Cool.
In the coming months and years, ChatGPT is going to get better and better and better. And for this sort of thing, interview analysis, when the source validity stuff and the fact that it completely makes stuff up, once that's fixed, and hopefully it's fixed, that's ChatGPT is really great. When I'm doing an analysis of a user interview session, generally speaking, across all projects, I'm looking for user needs and pain points. Generally speaking, that's what my analysis focuses on. It's so easy to get ChatGPT to do that in milliseconds. It's just not mature. Don't you dare do it now on anything that matters. But when you get your team to do it in, let's say, 2 years' time, I'm pretty much guaranteed they're going to be doing it with AI, right? The idea that we can be sitting down with Post-it notes and affinity maps is probably really old school. I think it's worth mentioning that, I don't know whether it'll be mature in 2 years, maybe it's in 2 months or 10 years. Who knows?
It's definitely not ready now. So this is definitely a future idea. Okay, our next question is, what's the best tools that you recommend for making user testing?
A notepad and a video service like Zoom or Meet or Teams. You do not need, or just a human being and you. I mean, that's another good way to do it, but a notepad and pen is probably advisable unless you've got great memory, and you probably don't, and you won't be paying attention to everything all the time. Anyway, You don't need tools, okay? There's this idea that you need tools. Now, that said, we were talking about usertesting.com earlier. There are times when having a remote, unmoderated platform is a really beneficial, good thing. Usertesting.com is a good platform. The participant pool is not good. So again, I do like usertesting.com. I don't like their participant pool. So use your own recruitment. For many people, that's why they use usertesting.com, because it comes with users and stuff. But if it means nothing, where was the value? Okay. Other than that, I don't really use tools. I use I use Adobe Premiere to make show reels when I need to. And I use Keynote to make presentations. I have used Camtasia for screen recording when I've not had permission in the video to record. But those are all kind of auxiliary tools, if you know what I mean. They're secondary tools. They're not research tools. So yeah, that's my answer, really. Don't let tools hold you back.
Right. Tools are here to help us with efficiency. And once upon a time, we did all these things without the tools. So the tools that I tend to use for usability testing is Axure for my prototypes, and video calls, like Nick said. And then typically I'm making my own notes. I am not bothering with coding and tagging because I usually don't need to do formal affinity diagrams or reports on these things. I'm normally reporting back to myself as the designer or telling a designer, so it's not a formal report, so I can just casually communicate, so I don't do a lot of formal analysis. And if I'm doing an unmoderated usability test, I've been using UX Tweak, hashtag not sponsored. I pay them, they don't pay me. I don't pay them right now. I turn them on when I need them. But for the unmoderated, where you do need some sort of system that explains a task to people and walks them through it and collects their responses, I do like UX Tweak. But again, you can use any tool you want, or you can do nothing unmoderated. You can do it all moderated, and you don't need these tools at all. So again, it's not, knowing tools is cool, and people do ask if you know tools, but it's not the core of all of this. Octavio says Notion is great. Notion AI is great. I haven't tried it, so we'll just have to believe you. Ana Lucia says, I've been checking Dr. Nick's experiences, and they are cool, but still not safe for using ChatGPT right now.
Can I ask Ana Lucia a very quick question? Because your surname, Coimbra, there's a very famous, in the medical world, there's a very famous professor of, he's a world leader in vitamin D, and it's known as the Coimbra protocol, named after him. I just wondered if he was any relation to yours, because it's such a kind of a relatively unique name, or at least it is in my part of the world. Anyway.
I don't know. And Octavio says Notion AI and Descript are awesome, which is so funny. Those are two tools I don't use at all. And so remember that anybody can use any tool that makes sense for you. It's got to have the right features and interface and budget. So Clarissa says, I love NVivo for organizing themes from lots of interviews. Super helpful for my neurodivergencies. Okay, cool. Let's check out NVivo. Delta CX team assemble. Ana Lucia says, I wish my surname is a city here in Portugal. Someone is sending in one more question. Everybody, we have to say no more questions. We've got 3 on the list, and that's going to have to be it. Kayleen, if you're still here, can you look at NVivo, please? I trust Kayleen more than pretty much anything, or anybody. Okay, so we've got a long question that came in anonymously, and it says, we have recently adopted SDUI, Server-Driven User Interface, as a way to construct our products at my fintech company. At the moment, our components are not very advanced and lack key features such as autosave and offline capability, which will negatively impact the UX if we were to go live. We intend to improve these components, but we don't have a strategy on the how. How can the UX and UXR team contribute contribute to the development and improvement of SDUI. It's primarily engineering and PM driven here.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that. The minute you said server-driven user interface, I'm like, holy shit, what's that?
Yeah, I'm
But
going
then
to
I'm like,
Google
so
it
tell
right
me,
now.
the machine is making is. I think it's just like a just-in-time UI, right? It knocks it together. It's probably something to do with maybe something personalized.
I can't even find it. I wonder, like, did these people make it up? Oh, Airbnb claims they use it. That's probably why anybody gives a shit.
Right. Yeah, I've never heard of that before.
I've never heard of it either.
At my company, FinTech. Right. So what you're saying is there's some key features like autosave and offline, which are pretty important probably for a FinTech company, right? What has I question? I can't. I know you're probably maybe on the call or not, but what's the point in having a UX or UXR team if you're just standing around watching this stuff going down? What, are you just observers here in the process, where the system spits out a UI and you just like wait? By the way, guys, that doesn't seem like a good idea. That seems like a nightmare. And again, the reason why Dr. Ari Zelmanow and I have got our course to handle exactly this. Look it up on Maven. Strategy on the how. Oh boy, this is a tough one because this is almost certainly driven by product manager pressure to get to market, right? Almost certainly. FinTech is also a pretty spicy, dynamic market, and there's a lot of competition. But pushing something out that doesn't have what you call key features, or what I would consider MVP type stuff, without that, it's not viable or feasible or whatever. But so you're going out for commercial reasons, not for good usage, good usability, good experience reasons, and that's a really bad idea. I'd do the testing on it anyway. That's my answer. Get the product manager, find out why there's this urgency to do this with your blinkers on. Why do we have to get to market so quickly? There might be a really good reason for it, in which case there's some rapid testing which you need to do and some rapid shifting to do. Or you bring evidence back that says, look, this is so critical, there's no point going live with it. Even getting to market first makes no sense if everyone uninstalls this thing and never uses it again, or just hates our brand or whatever. There's 1,000 good reasons for not doing premature releases, but you need to do it on evidence, not opinion, and you need to get that quickly. So do that with or without permission, ideally with permission, but if you can't, go ahead and do it anyway. But it's FinTech, probably toe the line there. Regulatory
it might be too confidential for them to do certain types of testing, so I would certainly say discuss it with your team and try to get some agreement there. But ultimately, I've got a lot of stuff about this in some of my slides and in my book, because my book really focuses on creating a more customer-centric strategy and products and services. So this is really in there. Ultimately, the strategy is revealed once you've done some research and you understand people's problems. Okay. Thanks, Kayleen. The strategy tends to be revealed when you've done some research and you understand some of those pain points or problems or tasks or unmet needs. So you're saying, hey, I think it's missing certain capabilities, but I can't tell if that's opinion or something or you're just comparing yourself to competitors. So the question is, if it were me, I would want to do some generative research with my target audience, because then I don't have to show them what we're building. And that shouldn't be a problem with confidentiality. There must be something that this tool does that is some sort of task that people do now. So the idea might be, okay, how do people decide how much they're saving? Or if this is FinTech, how do people balance their crypto investments? I'm making this up. I don't know. But whatever your tool or system does, there's a way that people do this now without your tool. And that's where you can do some observational research to look at that end-to-end journey or customer experience from the moment people have that need or that trigger all the way through the entire task. ambulance. So that's what I would do, because once you see that full end-to-end task and you realize where in this process your ecosystem is going to come into this, you can start to see those unmet needs. You can write problem statements. And when you're writing problem statements, the strategy tends to emerge if you have a bit of a strategic nature. Because when you start to see people's problems and you start to think high level possible solutions, the strategy just can come. And it's coming in Larry's book as well. Larry's knowledge-oriented design book that we're still working on, that I hope will be out in the next month or so. Larry covers this type of thing as well and says some similar things that I say in my book, though in my book I have some exercises that you can do. This is going to be a message about my internet sucking. Yeah, I know. My internet is blipping. It should be coming back now. I'm sorry about that. Everybody knows I have blippy internet out here. Did the stream die? Do people still see me? Hello? Am I on? You're back. Oh, good. Now, Dr. Nick doesn't look back, so he looks a little frozen. I'll need to send him a message about leaving and coming back, perhaps. Hold on. Let me message him. My internet blipped. Please leave and come back. Yeah, he asked if I lost internet. Yeah. Yeah, welcome to the country. Those of you who come and visit me at some point, you'll be amazed I have internet at all. Yeah, hi everybody. Thank you. Mishan, how have you been? Oh my gosh, some great names here. Hi, Diana. Now Let It Go is playing in my head. Why? I didn't say Let It Go. Who did? So let's see. So hopefully Nick will come back. Sorry, he's frozen. It's totally my fault. Oh, good. Thanks, Nick. Sorry, I froze everybody. Anna is making frozen Disney jokes. So anyway, in short, don't wait for somebody to give you a project. Don't wait for somebody to tell you what to do. Create a plan for the research you want to do. Reach out to me if you need help planning this or working on it, and bring it to people and say, look, we want to do this research so that we can make sure the product meets the unmet needs and solves problems and isn't just a collection of features loosely glued together.
Can I just say, though, that
yes, you can.
That's really great advice Debbie's giving you.
Oh, thank you.
I want to moderate it with some pragmatism, because the advice is great, but the delivery on this is absolutely everything, as much as the message, should we say. Because some people will hear that as, when Debbie was talking about people are doing the existing thing without using your thing, right? How are they doing it already? How are they currently solving the problem? When people hear that, they'll go, wait a minute, that's 3 months, that's 6 months, that's 200 grand. And they'll shut down immediately.
You're
and
right.
Because what they're hearing is kind of hippy dippy. When I say market research, I don't mean to be horrible to them, but you know what I'm saying. Just overblown, big, expensive, time-consuming stuff. When you sell what Debbie is very, I'm not disagreeing with her, with Debbie's strategy, try to sell it as efficiently as you can, because you do need to do all the things that she said, but don't make it sound like it's a big fat upfront or big delaying blocker type thing, right? It's got to be quick, sprinty. I don't want to use the word lean, but you know what I mean. Efficient, and then
Yes.
you'll be fine. You'll be.
Yeah, don't forget to check the micro lessons playlist here on YouTube. I've got at least one video about how I plan research, and depending upon what this is, maybe it's a few weeks. But if this is an engineering heavy organization, there's always something engineering can work on. Don't fall for the excuse of engineering will be waiting for you with nothing to do. I have never in my entire career seen an engineering team with nothing to do. Depending upon how far into things your company is, there's always a database to fix, metadata to improve, performance to improve, bugs to fix, something in the icebox we didn't get to. Do not fall for the engineering will have nothing to do. Engineering probably has a mountain of shit to do that they're ignoring. You've seen engineering with nothing to do?
Yeah, I totally have. It was on a major passport project, and it's because dual track went wrong. We had some problems. The dual track, it knocked the dual track on badly, and I think there's about like half a sprint, like a week of engineers, of devs doing nothing, waiting for tickets. It was catastrophic. It was bad. It was expensive, but
They
shit
couldn't work
happens.
on they couldn't work on other tickets?
No,
I've
that was yeah. It was they were literally sitting around doing nothing, and it was horrific. But that's the only time I've seen that incident happen, and that's probably one of the few times I've worked dual track.
Yeah, I guess it's possible, but I would still. Usually, I'm telling people if engineering, first of all, it also has to do with how you said dual track went wrong. So it sounds like we have to talk also about time estimation. I don't know if anybody saw my LinkedIn post from maybe just before Easter and Passover, but I talked about how I plan projects and I estimated 286 hours for something and it was 282. You know, like if you can get good at estimating, hopefully some of these projects or dual track or tri track or whatever it is don't end up going wrong. But sure, anything can go wrong. Even engineering sprints go wrong. They estimate a certain amount of points and they don't get to it. So, but I would say don't avoid research because someone acts like engineering will have nothing to do. Someone should figure out something for engineering to do. There's probably, as Chad and other people are pointing out, there's technical debt. We are running out of time, and I think we still have two questions. So let's get to these last two. Nick, thanks for staying for the long haul. How do you know you're growing? Oh, I forgot to put it on the screen. How do you know you're growing as a UXer? How can someone calibrate their growth over time? Should they be meeting mentors? How do you identify growth areas when there's so much you can learn?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I mentioned this in a post the other day because I only realized it myself. You UX is so nuanced that you won't necessarily overtly feel your growth because it happens really slowly and progressively, but not often in really noticeable step changes. Now, those step changes, those epiphanies, those level ups, they absolutely do happen. But you'll find, or at least I've found, when I look back at my career and I look back at gigs, a gig I'm really hated or I've had a hard time or I didn't think I learned anything at, actually has informed much more than I really actually overtly realized. Right. And that's kind of what I mean about your learning and not necessarily it being very perceptible by yourself. Having a mentor is obviously a good person to kind of reflect on this stuff from. But one of the things about UX is it's about your quality of thinking. And you should see your quality of thinking developing over time. Not your outputs, not your deliverables and all of that stuff. It's the thinking, your decision making. You'll start to make decisions based on stuff that you've done before or outcomes that have happened before. Or you will have had a broad range of experience, so you'll know which of those things to choose, and you're not just choosing the one that's familiar to you and is your comfort zone. These are indicators of how you're growing as a UXer. You're more comfortable in a wider variety of different situations or different research questions or different design situations, depending what form of UX you're taking. You know, sometimes it's skill based. You know, sometimes you'll take two really horrible IA gigs and you're like, yeah, I'm now down with IA. You know, I can do IA now. Other times it's softer skills around presentation stuff we were talked about earlier, which just takes practice and practice and practice over time, and you get better at it. So how you're growing as a UXer means you're growing in so many different directions, and all UXers are kind of shaped slightly differently. Yeah, I would say don't be hard on yourself, if you know what I mean. Like take the pressure off of yourself. You're learning by doing, and just keep doing it, and there will come a time when it feels like you've actually learned something and you're getting competency. In the early days, when you're in that Dunning-Kruger, the low end of things, you've got over Mount Stupid, and then you're in that pit of despair, the valley of despair. That's where all the learning is happening, and it doesn't feel like the learning is happening. It's a lot of frustration and a lot of anxiety, but you have to trust in the process, keep on at it. You are learning, and if you really are not learning, keep changing jobs and you will. Don't change too much. You got to stick stuff out because that's learning too.
Wow, I've got Shannon and Mishan here. I can't believe it. Hi, everybody. Hi, Mohammed. So, yeah, another thing that I would add, sure, mentors and coaches can track some of your progress. I also find that you can tell you're progressing when you try something like a research plan or a design and you run it by someone who is your lead or a manager or superior to you in some unofficial or official way, and they like your reasoning, they like your direction, they believe you've put the right thought into it, the right critical thinking, and you've come up with a good execution or a good research plan, or you've asked good questions, whatever it is. So I think that as you progress, you'll find that that you're putting the right thought and planning into things, and therefore getting it more right the first time, if I can put it that way. I mean, there's nothing wrong with getting it wrong-ish as you go. That's part of growth, and you should be unafraid to get it wrong, because hopefully there is a senior or lead or somebody who can, or your usability testing, that will help set you in the right direction. But that's what I tend to find. Last question, and thanks to everybody for staying a little
By the way,
late. Yeah.
Debbie, on that last question, you'll start to develop a voice in your own head, which is a bit like having your own senior in there. That's basically saying, are you sure you're done? Are you sure that's better? Is it, is that good enough? So if you're on the design side, it's that more crafting thing. Oh, you think it's finished, but actually keep going. You've got a lot more to go. Or if it's on the research side, is it your script? Is that really right? Have you piloted it? There's a lot of self-check, quality assurance that goes on, that develops with experience. So juniors need that externally from a mentor, but as you get into midweight, you'll start to develop that voice, and you'll start to, as Debbie says, get it more right more first times, because you're editing yourself and you're going, oh yeah, and just doing that, going that extra bit further, that bit more attention to detail, asking yourself the right questions. And then when you get to senior, you should have a fully developed thought set to do it all for yourself, and then teach people how to think. Do you see what I mean? That's how you check your progress in your quality of thinking, and it's how you're double checking yourself.
Cool. Thank you. So I'll put the last question up. Thanks, Nick, for staying extra late. This question says, hope there's time for my question. I joined a bit late. I always feel very robotic in interviews and usability tests. I'm trying to be conscious of my body language when facilitating and not influencing people. I'm friendly and welcoming at the start of the call, but the moment we start the questions, I try to go neutral. How necessary is this? What are some things to be aware of when it comes to body language and facilitation?
Wow, that's a massive question, and we're obviously talking about bias and skew, all kinds of stuff that goes on. The experiment to influence. You don't want to be the one causing behavioral changes. Now that said, we don't operate in like this plastic, hermetically sealed, impersonal world, right? We're dealing with human beings here. Yes, we do need to standardize ourselves and our behavior to an extent, but not to the point that you become robotic. Okay, that's really, really important, because I've been with too many people who are scared to be themselves and become very robotic. And let me tell you something, that roboticness sets people off. And believe me, that's a behavioral skew. Okay, people are like, oh, like you're not acting back normally. And people can sense that stuff, and it's weird. Okay, so there's a happy medium that you get to with a bit of confidence, where you're able to be yourself, but you aren't like, nodding them into the right questions and lots of other things, or crossing your body off, or what I mean, closing yourself down. I would say don't overthink it, but the best advice I can give you is watch yourself back. Okay, the best thing that the pandemic did for us is also the worst thing that the pandemic did for us as user researchers. Before the pandemic, video was optional, should we say. It wasn't always a thing. Post-pandemic, video is mandatory, or it's default, because it's usually remote. that means we've got action replays of all of our work. That's a good thing and a really bad thing. When people who aren't used to seeing a raw, uncut thing, they will shred into everything about you. And having an action replay of you at work is something that no one else has in their jobs, generally speaking, unless maybe you're a surgeon or a pilot or something, right? But for you as the user researcher, it's incredibly invaluable. Obviously, you have to watch these things back because you're doing the analysis on them. But whilst you're doing them, look at you, right? If you're not, what's the word? Irked. If you're not getting red flags at your own behavior, look harder. Because I do it all the time and I shouldn't do, and I'm always getting better as a result of it. And I guess what I'm trying to leave you with here is that the user researcher, the facilitator role is a constant improvement role. Okay, I've met loads of great researchers and facilitators. We're constantly finding that optimal ground of being human and standard, right? You'll get it wrong sometimes and you'll get it really wrong sometimes. Remember, we're dealing with human beings here, not robots. And so they vary as much as we vary. And there's an interaction, a chemistry that goes on, and it's not easy all the time. People really underplay it. The skill of a facilitator, face to face or on video, it's they're in your hands. And that's a kind of a responsibility. So I guess what I'm saying is find that balance. With the more amount of practice you get, you'll find what works for you. Because what works for me, what works for Debbie, what works for anybody else in the audience isn't necessarily going to work for you and your personality and your users. So just practice. But watch your videos back. That's the number one learning here, because you'll see yourself at work, if you know what I mean. And you should be able to see where you can improve.
Yeah, I can't disagree with any of that. I think it's great. Couple of things that I would add is read your discussion guide a bunch of times before the interview starts. I find that sometimes what happens is people are able to start the interview in a friendly way. They might have an icebreaker question or two, and then when it gets to the real questions, they start getting a little bit more robotic, like so I'm just looking at a piece of paper that happens to be on my desk. Are you already using WordPress? And then because they're reading their questions and all of that rapport and whatever disappears. And it's not because they're being neutral, it's because they're not as fluid with their questions as they could be. They probably didn't practice their questions out loud a couple of times before the session started, and now they're reading them and they're so afraid to get them wrong, and they're like, are you using WordPress? Just because that's what my page happens to say. Because we got scrap paper over here. So I tell people that's one thing that you can do. Also, try to practice a neutral but friendly face. I find sometimes people want neutrality so bad that while people are answering, they look like this.
Oh, God, never do that. Honestly, I'm constantly...
Yes.
Unless they're blind or visually impaired in any which way, in which case I'm doing the same thing but through verbally. It's a two-way street, and especially in a video interaction, you have to give the non-verbals and the nods and all of that stuff, because that's what communication is comprised of. It isn't just words. Sorry, I'm getting a bit ranty there. Sorry, carry on. But
yeah, ultimately, I would say watch some of the shows that I do where I have a guest, because I'm using this technique when I have a guest. Yes, sometimes I'm distracted and I'm typing and I'm copying and pasting. Okay, you know that, and I wouldn't be doing that during a research session. But outside of that, when Nick is talking and I'm not copying and pasting and I'm not dealing with all these other things, I'm looking at the camera, I'm giving a little micro smile. I'm just making sure that I have a little bit. I'm not doing this.
Okay, yeah.
I'm not super smile. I'm not super sad. I'm not straight faced. I'm giving little micro smile, couple of nods, little fake eye contact because it's a camera. That's right.
Look at
And
that.
sometimes they say something and I say, ah. They go, oh, and then I really messed it up. Wow, I lost all my money in NFTs. And I go, oh. And so, or they go, oh gosh, my mom just died. And I go, oh, I'm sorry. And so I think, we do want to be neutral. We don't want to bias people. We don't want our body language to say a lot. So you just have to practice just having a good open body language. You don't want to do a lot of this. I catch myself doing that sometimes in some of my interviews, but when I see myself doing it on the call, I will, try to undo that, because that is a closed body language, and it's something that I find that I do when I'm coming up, and it's just an accidental habit, when I'm coming up with a follow-up question that isn't on my list. And I find sometimes I go, and that's just a weird habit that I have. But as soon as I look back at the screen and it's Zoom or whatever, and I see myself doing that, I make sure that I open up. So we're all imperfect. There's, like Nick said, we're going to get it right and we're going to get it wrong. And it's just a matter of practicing. And that's how you get there. Karen says, thank you for the masterclass. You're providing so much value that exceeds books and courses. I wish you all the best and deeply appreciate your efforts. Back at you, Karen. Go ahead, Nick.
What was I going to say? Yeah, I'll say something relatively controversial. Okay, so I've just finished a discovery on an intranet. All the users were internal users. I can easily say I was a lot more familiar, a lot more friendly, a lot less standardized than I was in previous research sessions for a few reasons. Number one, these are internal users. Number two, there was a lot of pain relating to this really bad intranet. So people are having really tough times of it. And just for me, and this is what works for me, you've got to find what works for you. Because ultimately, what we care about is getting good insight, right? Getting solid insight. It's my belief that you can be you as long as you're getting valid, reliable insight. That tends to happen more, I think, potentially in a discovery situation where you can be a bit more looser with that. And that's just my opinion, okay? Shoot me down if you feel like it. In an evaluative or not generative situation, I believe it's much more critical to be much more careful in your standardization. I think you can really send things off because you're dealing with behavior. You're dealing with when you're in discovery, especially with an intranet discovery, it's very factual. I'm finding out some very factual needs and pains. It's not opinion based. You see what I'm saying? When I'm doing something evaluative, can you buy the red shoes? How I phrase that, how the tone of my voice, my body language is all going to fundamentally affect the success and failure of that red shoe journey. Can you see how there isn't one size fits all for this? But generally speaking, I mean, everything that Debbie says and I say is spot on. But I think in discovery, especially when you're dealing with more emotive stuff, you have to be more human because we're dealing with human beings. You just are, right? I did youth work stuff and other youth worker stuff and stuff. You'll get the best out of people and better insight if you give more of yourself. But it does come at bias risk.
Thank you. And Ana Lucia adds, prompting is a technique used in cognitive behavioral therapy. It is evidence-based. Yes, please show something that tells your interviewees that you are listening. Nod something. Your interviewee will respond a lot better. Yeah, and just grow your confidence. Even if you're not doing the best job, try to be confident. I always say that one reason why interviews and observations are so exhausting, in addition to all the work your brain is doing, is you're putting on a show. I come here on YouTube and I put on a show, though of course people who've met me outside of YouTube are surprised that I'm actually just like this all the time. But I've literally had people say to me, oh my God, wait, I figured you just had a character on your show. And it's like, no, I'm like this all day, for better or for worse. Right, honey? He says yes. So, for better or for worse, this is actually just me. I just try to pronounce my words a little bit more crisply when I'm in these scenarios. That's really the difference. But I think that you end up with a bit of an interview persona, a character, where you have to, for starters, I have to be way less judgmental. I've had people say things that were not the best. I've had people express political views that ran against mine, and you just have to keep smiling and nodding. People, oh, those damn libtards, blah blah blah, and you have to go.
That's nice, dear.
That's right. You can't blink because they'll see you blink, and you have to make sure that they don't feel judged. Whereas the rest of my day, I'm absolutely judging you, but because we all do that. But during the interview, I cannot be a judgmental person. I might not agree with you. If they ask me hey, those damn libtards, you agree? And I'll say, well, today we're interviewing you, and usually they'll giggle at that, and we'll move on. But Kayleen says, I've watched back my interview footage and I thought to myself, why was I nervous? I have no reason to be nervous and I could be throwing my participants off. Yes, that's why I said you have to come up. This is almost a character that you're playing, and that character is confident. That character is confident, friendly, and non-judgmental. That character, and that's to me the right neutrality to have. The right neutrality to have isn't we are the robots. The right neutrality is going to be
but never
kindergarten
cheesy.
teacher smile.
Yeah, but never cheesy, right? Like never that like the super wide cheesy overconfident smile. That one. But with that overconfident attitude, once you put those together, and you've got like a plastic salesman motivational speaker type, right? That's not who we are.
I'm Troy McClure.
Yeah, exactly that. Exactly. Yeah, no, not that.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks to everybody for staying super late with us. We've been here 2 hours and 15 minutes. I can't believe it. Super marathon adventure. My, how the time flies. Sorry to Miroslav we didn't get to your question today, but we will make you the first question next week. Next week, I do believe I have a special guest. I'm going to have Greg Marinelli back. He was on the show last year. He's one of the few people I know who says design thinking and actually means human-centered design. So don't be thrown off when he says design thinking. Tomorrow is our last episode of Book Club, and because people started crying when I announced that to the Book Club, we are going to now every other week meet live in Remo for Delta CX Hangout, fun time networking, and what I also like to call group therapy. So it won't be here on YouTube. We'll start doing it every other week starting April 29, April 26. I forgot what day it is, but it'll be in the calendar. Remember, you can always go to deltacx.com/links and see our freaking Google Calendar. You can add the Google Calendar to your freaking Google Calendar. You will know when everything is. Thursday is a panel discussion. The future of UX. Is it utopian or dystopian? Hi, Kate. My first time attending. This is wonderful. Can't wait to attend more. Yes, we do office hours every Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Italy time. That's where I am. Nick joins us once a month for the extended 12-inch dance mix version. And then we get a couple of guests here and there who come back. And then Friday we'll be practicing critical thinking. So remember, if you're wondering what shows are going on, go to deltacx.com/links, look at the Google Calendar, add the Google Calendar to yours, join our Slack or our Discord. They are free, and they have a live events channel where I have a bot telling you a day before and 15 minutes before what the hell is going on in our world and how to get there. So don't forget to look for my upcoming workshop with Larry Marine. You can find that at cxcc.to/ RSI for Research Strategy Intensive. And don't forget to look on maven.com for The Influential Researcher, which is Dr. Nick's and Dr. Ari's upcoming workshop in early May. You can still get seats for all of these. Yours is remote only, right?
Yeah, it's remote live though, so it's a cohort-based course, so it's not recorded. It's myself and Dr. Ari live interaction, not just a video of us.
Right. So yours is remote live. Ours is hybrid live. You can join us live on Remo, or you can actually come to Denver, Colorado and join me or Larry live. We're each doing one day. You can sign up for one day or both. Thanks to everybody who joined. Great group today. Huge group today. Thanks for all of your questions. Sorry we didn't get to any. Nick, you can have the last word. Anything else you want to plug or mention?
No, I would just like to say thank you for everybody. I actually recently just passed 20,000 followers on LinkedIn, which is great. I'm really that's the only milestone I really cared about, and now I don't think I care about it anymore because I don't think I'll ever get to 30. But if I do, it'll be a serendipitous act. So just thank you very much. If you don't follow me on LinkedIn, please do. And thank you very much for all the support. Really, really great. And thank you for Debbie for having me.
But always happy to have you here and support you in any way I can. So with that, we will say goodbye to everybody, and I will see the book club tomorrow. Bye, everybody. Customer centricity as business intelligence. Visit deltacx.com to learn why we are